Hello, my name is Arcadia Armour, and I'm going over my section 4 through 6 of my lesson plans for class. We will begin with section 4, activities. What activities have you planned? Introduction to modeling. Teacher will introduce lessons to student via PowerPoint. Presentation, lecture, and textbook in a whole group discussion. Once information has been discussed, a rubric and checklist will be given to students to bring clarity of what needs to be done before starting on presentation for the class. The students will then be paired based on learning level. The guided practice. Teacher will hand out sample problems created by teacher. Students will solve sample problems independently, and before the end of class, students will return to whole groups so teacher can clarify answers on chart paper. Teacher will then separate students in two pairs. Independent practice. Students will begin to work on a science scenario by solving arithmetic problems and transferring all necessary information to Microsoft Excel. They will use rubric checklists to make sure they have all necessary information to begin starting on presentation for the following week that meet guidelines set forth and agreed upon by teacher and student. The closing. Teacher will call students to whole groups to answer necessary information concerns about the content area covered. I will also reiterate what was discussed and what is needed from students. Students will begin to prepare to create presentation the following week. At this time, all teacher feedback will be noted and given to students. Formative assessment. Students will complete sample problems and teacher will assess understanding how well they did on sample problems in the following week. Students will begin to prepare for presentations that are to be done by the peer assigned to student. Why have you chosen this activity? The activities that I have chosen will help me deliver instruction, assess retention, evaluate understanding, and also help monitor how students work in groups. By introducing the information to students in a whole group setting, this will help clarify any information that was not understood. I will let them work in pairs based on learning mastery level to help any students who may have a hard time understand the covered material. Now, for Section 5. The Section 5 mainly deals with the materials that will be used or the resources that will be used by the teacher to clarify learning for the students. The first one I have, what instructional materials will you use, if any? Excel 2016 textbook, reference to information covered, PowerPoint slides to explain information, Smartboard to present PowerPoint, computer to access Microsoft Excel, chart paper to work and solve equation, tape, pencils, which is student use, expo marker, teacher and student use, rubric checklist created by teacher and student for student use. Why have you chose these materials? I have chose the following instructional materials to help facilitate my instruction to students. The Excel 2016 notebook will be a reference for students and peers who did not understand the information thoroughly. This will also be used at the beginning and middle of instruction. Along with the textbook, chart paper will be hung around class to remind students of sample problems. The computers will be used during the entirety of lesson. I will use the PowerPoint to go over all information from sample problem created, and this will be shown on the smartboard in my classroom. The students will need pencils, markers, and the checklist to properly complete the presentation in the future week. Evaluation. How and when did you plan to evaluate student learning of the content of this lesson? Well, I have several options, which I included 5 because one of them can actually be taken off. The first one would be pre-assessment on student previous knowledge of information covered. I want to do a pre-assessment because I want to know where my student stands, and this is a way of formative assessment that will help me evaluate them in the end. Number 2, completion of sample problems individually. By me giving them the time to work individually and be called back to groups, once it's done, it gives a clear understanding to the students. Like if they didn't understand at the beginning, by me going over again will help them fully retain the information that is covered. Number 3, assessment of content covered to check student understanding retention. That will be done using the completion of the sample problems. So I may have to take that one off and just leave the assessment of content covered to check student understanding because we want to make sure all students understand what is going on. 4, presentation. The presentation will not be due at this particular time, but it will be due the following week because I feel that if I try to do that this week, it will put too much on the student. So we want to make sure we have the student best interest at heart. And the last one, post-assessment on information coverage. Okay, you will see why have you chosen the approach for evaluation. Each student will be evaluated through assessment and presentation, which will be in the future. The information will be covered through the entirety of the class and also have student teacher input. Their pre-assessment is mandatory, however, the post-assessment can be negotiated depending on the complexity of the presentation. Students will only receive grade on simple problems created by a teacher to assess the understanding of material before starting on presentation for a class. Each student will receive a rubric checklist of what is to be included in the presentation and will be able to elect whether last assessment is needed to receive a passing grade. So I don't want to make it too hard for them, but I do want them to understand how important it is for them to understand the entire lesson. So I have several ways to check their assessment just in case one does not work, because we all know that each student is different. I seen the questions you had. No, this will not, the presentation will not have to be done this week, but we will be focusing on it because we're starting on the information about it. So we want to make sure we connect it some type of way. So if there's anything else, please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you.